G'day, welcome back to RC Model Reviews and another drone news bulletin. Bulletin of news about the hobby. Today it's pretty much focused on drones, and I'm going to start with the Federal Aviation Administration. Now, the US Department of Transport has announced 12 new appointees to their Advanced Aviation Advisory Committee. What's that, you might ask? Well, it's a group of people that the FAA uses for advice and guidance when it comes to things like regulating the drone industry and the hobby. The FAA realizes they don't know everything, so they're going to get a bunch of really smart folks, stick them in a room and give them tasks. They task them to come up with guidance in certain areas, be it beyond visual line of sight, flying or whatever. They give them these tasks and they go away and they come back with their reports, and then they tell the FAA what they recommend in terms of changes and rules and all that sort of stuff. So it's a really, really important committee. Now, before we get started, we need to look at a piece of data. That piece of data is the fact that 4 in every 5 drone flights is conducted recreationally. So that's 80% of every drone flight, every UAS flight in America is recreational in nature. That's pretty important, because you would think then that if this advisory committee is going to be advising the FAA on the creation of rules and giving them guidance, there should be a fairly good representation of the hobby on that committee, but there's not. Before these new appointees, there were just 2 members from the hobby. In fact, they weren't actually purely hobby representatives. Both of them have commercial interests in the drone industry, so there is no pure hobby representation on this really important committee that guides the FAA in making rules and planning the future of drones in the American airspace. That's rather unusual, and it's also rather worrying. But I thought, well, 12 new appointees, there's got to be someone from the hobby in that lot, right? Well, let's just scan through the people that have been appointed. We have the Chief Executive Officer of the National Business Aviation Association. Well, that's not a hobby appointee. We have the Chief Operating Officer of the Port of Seattle. Well, I don't think his interests are from the hobby point of view. We have the Chief Executive Officer of Ferrovial Vertiports. Enough said. We have a Professor of Aerospace Engineering from the University of Michigan. We have the Founder and Chief Executive Officer of ANRA Technologies, clearly a commercial interest. The Executive Director of Advanced Technology Initiatives, Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. We have Executive Vice President of the National Air Traffic Controllers Association. Again, this is a commercial interest. Vice President, Flight Operations and Safety for UPS. Well, they're definitely a commercial interest. The Head of Aviation Regulatory and Legal Affairs at Zipline, which is a very successful commercial operator. The President and General Counsel of Blade Air Mobility. Again, it's another commercial operator. Chief Executive Officer of the Helicopter Association International, commercial. And Executive Director for Community Air Mobility Initiative. So there we go. They had an opportunity to redress the imbalance, or actually to give us any pure representation, and they failed. They chose not to. And this is worrying because it shows the level of contempt. Now, I use the word, I don't use it lightly, the level of contempt that the FAA holds for this hobby. We don't count for beans, count for nothing. Even though we are the single largest user of drones and the sub 400-foot airspace by a country mile, we don't count for anything. All the people on the advisory committee have commercial interests. They have commercial interests, and therefore their decisions are focused solely on how can we make money out of this airspace, and how can we sideline a hobby that's just inconveniently in the way. Now, it's turning into a rant. I don't want this to be a rant. I'm doing a rant on XJet. So if you're not a subscriber to my XJet channel, go over there now and subscribe, because you will get a lot more information. Also, that's the fun side of things. It's showing how the hobby can be enjoyed by everybody. It's the promotional side of the hobby, but also it's calling regulators to account. But I just wanted to cover this appointments because I think they're very important. Right, next piece of news. DJI make a product called the Aeroscope. What's that, you say? It is a device that, think about remote ID. It's a device that listens out for drones. Mainly listens out for DJI's own drones, which have had a form of remote ID for a very long time. And so it listens out for drones, and when it detects a drone, it logs the data, where the operator is, where the drone is, its flight path, what it was doing, all that sort of stuff, and identifying information such as who the drone is registered to through the DJI activation system. Remember, you can't fly a DJI drone without activating it first, so it knows who's flying, all that sort of stuff. And it logs it, and in America, one company has 66 of these aeroscopes, and it runs 53 of them in the USA. And that company's been uploading all the data from these aeroscope units to a database on an Amazon Web Services server in America. And just recently, 54 gigabytes of that data was leaked. Or if you like back to the 80s, 54 gigabytes of that data was leaked. And we learned some interesting stuff from that leak. First of all, the figure was 80k user IDs. Now, I assume that's individual DJI activation accounts. So 80,000 individual users operating these drones, or registered users of these drones. But here's the real number we should be looking at. There were 90 million flights logged in this database. 90 million flights. Now, we don't know over what period of time this database covered, but 90 million flights, that's a huge number of flights. And if we assume that 4-to-1 ratio, that's over 70 million recreational drone flights logged by this Aeroscope system. Now, my question is, with over 70 million recreational drone flights logged, where are the deaths? Where are the significant injuries? Where is the property damage that should have occurred? Unless this is absolutely safe, which I think this conclusively proves recreational drone flying is totally safe. So why do we need more regulation, more restriction, remote ID, all these constraints and restrictions on what we, the hobby, are allowed to do? How does that come to pass? Well, it comes to pass because we have no regulation and there's no representation on that committee that advises the FAA. That committee is going to advise the FAA what's best for industry, not what's best for the hobby. And of course, we have the AMA and other groups. They've been bought off with the option of, or the prize of being a CBO and having freers. They've been bought off. They're not representing the hobby. They're representing themselves. Anyway, as I say, dangerously bordering on a rant. Let's get on with the news. Now, interesting thing has happened at Dallas. One of the runways at Dallas Airport had to be closed because GPS interference has been upsetting the navigational equipment on the aircraft. And this raises an extremely important question. Now, the judge that ruled on the challenge to the FAA's remote ID bill recently started out their summary with the words, "Drones are coming and lots of them." Yeah, that's what we're told. This is what we're told by everybody. All those people on that advisory committee are telling us, oh, the industry is going to grow. We're going to have all these drones, delivery drones, advanced air mobility. That's pilotless flying taxis, eVTOLs, all that sort of stuff. This is all coming. The skies will be filled with our drones. So get the hobby out of the space. We need it for all this activity. Now, my question is, what happens when this sort of thing, GPS interference, causes all those drones, or at least drones in a certain area, maybe over a highly populated area, to not know where they are? The GPS disappears. They have no way to determine where they are or where they're going, because GPS is what they use. There's no fallback. There is no pilot sitting in the driver's seat. The reason this didn't affect the aviation industry too much is because all these airliners have pilots. So if the GPS system fails and they have to switch to other navigational aids, or they have to reroute, it's not a problem. They can do that. There's a pilot. There's wetware in the cockpit to take care of that. But with a delivery drone, you will have like Google Wing in Australia. They don't have one pilot for every drone that's flying delivery routes. They have probably one pilot for all the drones. So if suddenly all the drones say, we don't know where we are, help, what is he going to do? In fact, I'll tell you what he's going to do. He's going to do a precautionary landing like this, where the wing delivery drone landed on electrical lines, cutting power in an Aussie town. In fact, one of the reports said the drone actually burst into flames. So there's no fallback. There is no fallback. Imagine you're in a flying taxi, whizzing above the urban landscape, and your pilotless flying taxi suddenly stops because the GPS signal is no longer usable. Interference or something else has caused the loss of GPS. What does your air mobility unit do? It doesn't know where it is. It doesn't know where to go. All it can do is go down. And if something below, like power lines or people or a freeway, happens to be in the way, really bad things are going to happen. As happened with the Google Wing thing. Now imagine the Google Wing thing, they were very lucky. Now, this drone, a precautionary landing, shows you they have very little control, or they would not have chosen to land on power lines and cut the power to an entire district of a town, or possibly risk the drone bursting into flames. So they have very little control. And that was just one drone. It wasn't suddenly hundreds of drones all at once needing help. It was just one drone and they couldn't land it safely. So imagine if that, in this case though, imagine if it landed on the power lines, caught on fire, it's got maybe plastics and things, maybe the plastic then drips down onto a child underneath. Maybe there was a child in a pram underneath the power lines, and that child, the pram could have caught on fire. This was not a safe situation. This is just one drone. And as I say, if there are hundreds of drones and we have this same situation where GPS goes out, the results don't even bear thinking about. So why, again, let me put the question, why is the FAA so intent on regulating hobbyists out of the airspace? Because we're too dangerous. Yet they're allowing, in fact, they're encouraging, they're promoting this use of the airspace by things that have no fallback. There's no safety mechanism. There's no way to mitigate a total failure of GPS. It just, things will fall from the sky. They seem to think that's okay, though. There's no, I don't understand. As hobbyists, we could point out the folly of this. But anyway, as I say, this is not a rant. This is just a news thing. I thought those were the things you might like to see, things that piqued my curiosity this week in the newswires. And if you want more of this, let me know. And I will be doing rants, as I say, on XJet. I've got some videos that I'm making for the regulators. It's about time we inform the regulators just what's right. For far too long, we have sat back as a community, as a hobby, and waited for the regulators to present rules to us. And then allow us to comment and ignore most of the comments and say, well, this is what you have to do. I think that's wrong. I think that's wrong. We are the ones with decades of knowledge, experience, and understanding of what we're doing. We shouldn't be dictated to by a bunch of suits who sit behind a desk or have a strong commercial interest and have never done what we do. They're going to, it's like they've never done FPV flying. They've never done half the stuff we do, but they're going to tell us how to do it safely, even though that Aeroscope report indicates we're already doing it incredibly safely. We don't need their help. In fact, they need our help. We're the ones that have been doing BV loss flight for almost 2 decades. And today in the committee meeting, they only just start to get going on coming up with strategies and procedures for BV loss. We've already done it for nearly 20 years. So why not come to us and get help from the experts? But they can't do that. They can't bring themselves to do that. We have no representation. It's very sad, it's very tragic, and it is the subject of some videos and rants coming up on XJet. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Thank you to my Patreon supporters. You make this all possible. That's very important. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Bye for now.